Hello and welcome. I'm Lady Icellina, and today I'm going to show you some basics of how to make your own molds and resin casting. But first, please follow me on Instagram and subscribe to my Patreon for early access to fans-only tutorials. Silicone molds are cheap and very easy to find. However, they're not very unique. So for custom molds, you can find silicone rubber kits at any craft store. They come in either a 2-part liquid form or a 2-part putty form. I did not like the putty at all for making my D20s. They encapsulated nice and they cured very nice, but it also had a lot of air bubbles because it was encapsulated. Here you can see the deformities in the resin. So for certain projects, I do suggest it. For the putty system, you get 2 canisters. This one I got from Michael's Arts and Crafts for $24.95. A little hint here, don't forget to use your coupons. You can find them online, and they can usually equal up to 20 to 40% off. So for this system, you want to make sure you have equal parts of the containers, and you also want to make sure you mix this thoroughly. You want to make sure there are no swirls and it's all one uniform color. One of the cons of this is that you only have 3 minutes to work with this, so you have to make sure your objects are cleaned and ready. Here I am pressing a bunch of things into it and encapsulating the D20 again. Point down, you want to make sure it's properly positioned so that way air bubbles have a chance to escape. But the pro of this is that it is done curing in about 25 minutes. It's very rigid and it'll hold its shape. Next up, we have this amazing mold rubber. You can get this at Michael's Arts and Crafts for $24.99 and also on Amazon. Here we're casting another D20 as well as some crystals. These crystals are actually chandelier crystals. You'll notice the holes in the end. And that is important because we're going to be stringing them up in clusters to make a crystal cluster effect. Because liquid rubber is so detail orientated, you want to make sure every single surface is very clean. Any dirt or fingerprints will show up. And you want to make sure they are hanging just right in the position you want the mold to form around. These containers are nice, especially with mold making. You can get these online and they have the volume on the side for measuring. So here you can see the clusters I've tied together, hanging above the container. So we are going to be opening this up here. Again, there's 2 parts. You got the catalyst and then the actual rubber. Always read instructions. That's so important. Some measuring equipment here. So opening that up, you can see it's very liquid. So we're going to be opening that up. Make sure you are wearing gloves because this is very sticky. Have your mixing implement on hand, and you want to make sure this is mixed extremely thoroughly, otherwise it will not set right and you just wasted your mold making material. Make sure to scrape the sides. You don't want to see any catalyst. So the tool I'm using is called a tongue depressor. You can get these on Amazon for fairly cheap. And we're just going to dump that right on into the mold, completely covering the D20. And it looks like we have a little bit extra in the container, so we're going to actually switch containers. We're going to take a little bit out of the container and put it into the smaller crystal container. So for removing the molds for these ones, you're going to have to cut it. What I'm using is a steel cutter, which you can get in sheet metal supplies. I use this for everything. So we managed to crack that open, and what we're going to do is we are going to pull those crystals out individually. And watch out for the suction in there. It'll end up scarring up your hands pretty bad, but you just have to wiggle it loose. You can always push from the bottom. That'll help get the crystals back up to the surface. And there you notice a nice mold. This one's going to be a little tricky, but the same concept. So here I have two different types of resin. One comes in a kit, and the other one has the clear polyester casting resin. I always use this because it ends up very crystal clear, it casts faster, and there's less bubbling. However, there are multiple kits out there. Any craft store will at least have 5 or 6 different resin casting kits. So make sure they're well shaken up, and then you are going to do a few drops per ounce. The rule is usually the thicker it is, the less drops of catalyst you're going to use, but I like to use extra just to make sure that it hardens. If it's still tacky, that means it was improperly mixed or there wasn't enough catalyst. So on the back it'll have drops per inch of resin that you're going to be using, and that'll show you how many drops of catalyst you're going to need. You'll notice that the thinner it is, the more drops you're going to need. And here you'll notice how clear it is. I love using it because it resists yellowing. A trick for getting bubbles out if you are casting, you can use an atomizer or a small mister full of isopropyl alcohol, and that'll get rid of the bubbles that go to the top of your mold. Another trick is heat. You can notice the one on the right, it hardened a little too fast, and that's because I added a little bit too extra catalyst, but here you can see how crystal clear it comes after it's finished. So now we are going to mix it. Oh, camera error. And make sure those bubbles are clear. Always wear gloves. Resin is extremely sticky and very hard to get off. My work desk is extremely full of resin and it's going to be impossible to get off. So we're going to slow pour a little bit by little bit into these molds. Careful to avoid bubbles. By going on the sides and warming up your mold, you can avoid bubbles. Slower the better. And here we're casting those crystals again. And then we're going to add those LEDs while it's curing. So that way it'll encapsulate that LED and it won't separate. Always use the waterproof ones because it has that band and it'll stop resin from getting inside. And after it's done curing, you're going to grasp that batter pack and you're going to slowly and gently pull it out of the mold. Careful not to snap the resin from the light. Let's do a little twist, pull, and there's your gem. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and follow and like my pages.